When you're driving all alone at night, do you think about our love?
Welcome to Here We Are Now, a series that looks at what life experiences went into the creation of your favorite art and why we love it. Today we will be talking about the life experiences, be them traumatic or joyful, that went into the creation of the 1995 Disney and Pixar classic, Toy Story. I'm Matt Collette, a creative who has spent decades working in mental health. Today's special guest is David Camarena, a therapist whose journey led him to be a very successful YouTuber and musician. Now let's discover new connections between music, movies, and mental health. All right, hey everyone, welcome to the official first episode of Here We Are Now, music, movies, and mental health. And we were just listening to August Burns' Blue by Heart Like War and sipping that Pixar coffee cup right now that I assume was purchased for $5,000 at Disneyland.
Yeah, it's accurate.
We have David Camarena.
Yeah.
We never use each other's last name.
I know, it's true.
David is actually in that band and just got back from Japan for the second time?
Third time, actually. Third tour, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Heart Like War and how you feel about me mispronouncing your last name after knowing you for all these years.
No, it's cool. I know I my last name is, Hispanic origin. In Spanish, it's Camarena, and then in English, it's Camarena. But a lot of times people mispronounce it. They'll say Camarino or Cameron. I'll be Kirk Cameron sometimes. So it really depends on who's saying my name, but it's all good. No worries. But yeah, I'm in a band called Heart Like War. We are pop punk music. That's the genre that we play. And it's really fun. We've been doing it for a long time. I was very much early on doing the music because it was a positive coping skill for me. I had a lot of stress and anxiety in my life and some depression, and music and art was my outlet for that. And Heart Like War was that spiritual battle, the internal battle between good and evil, but also just with us, our own mental health. So that was always something that was ingrained in my psychology as I was studying psychology. And then for those of you who don't know, I'm also a therapist, which I'm sure we'll get into, but Heart Like War.
Man, that was my punchline. I was going to hit him with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So going into that, for the Heart Like War part, we just finished our third tour in Japan. We're signed to a record label out there called Sunlight Records. They take care of us. Every time we've gone, we've built our fan base. We continue to get offers. Every time we leave, they want to have us back right away. So we go once a year now. That's kind of our goal. The whole pandemic thing hindered us from doing more, but we went in 2018, 2019, and now 2023, and we're hoping to go back 2024. So yeah, it's been exciting. It's been fun. I have a great team of people now. It's not just, we're 4 members now. We have a lead guitarist. We have a whole PR team. We have a booking team. We have an artist team. We have a videography team. We have a bunch of people helping us, and it's really humbling that it's just grown from me being an acoustic guitar in my bedroom to where we are today with just so much help and so many fans. And I'm just grateful. I'm very humbled and grateful. And all my music is about positive mental health, having a good time, positive energy. That's what I'm all about.
So you guys, David and I met like a romantic comedy, sort of, because before COVID, I was traveling literally throughout the whole state every week I ran a music and arts program for a very large behavioral health company on the West Coast. And the job itself was absolutely fantastic. Had a great time. And one day I went and I would do like original music and films with residents who were there due to trauma or mental health issues, drug and alcohol counseling. A lot of them were homeless, are trafficked. So a heavy scene, but you very creative. The nerves are wide open to be creative. And I'm setting up my session, and I hear, "Ooh, Back to the Future," and I look, and David and I, we just fell in love. My partner calls David my boyfriend.
That's hilarious. Jackie says you're Doc and I'm Marty. So
yeah, well, yeah, I have gotten older. Thanks for pointing that out. But anyway, we just kind of immediately became big friends, which is important in those environments to have people that you not only can trust as a coworker, but is passionate about something, man. I won't go down that rabbit hole today, but for me, a big thing that's really hindering the mental health, we'll call it machine, is the disconnect and loss of passion in the staff and the therapists
Mm.
especially. um and David never
Speaking of Back to
had
the
that.
Future.
Yeah, I had my Marty.
Good timing. Doc, you gotta go.
um so basically someday David and I will be doing specific Back to the Future things like Bob Gale's high school experience, but that's for another day.
It'll be a
The
10-hour
point is that
podcast.
David and I both have like in the trenches hardcore experience in mental health.
Mhm.
um and we met each other there, so we have a good bond, and we're both pandemic parents.
Yeah,
We both had our
sure.
children during whatever all this has been or
Yeah.
still continues to be, or I don't know. And that's another bond, Back to the Future. But I was there and I counseled him when he was talking about his job and his challenges, which were the same as mine. And this lunatic went off and started his own YouTube channel, and it is incredibly successful
Thank
to
you.
the
Appreciate
point that he is, as of right now, not working as a therapist unless you talk to him, in which case he's going to reach out and help you in some way. So can you tell us, before we go into Toy Story, because
that. Right.
what happened, like what clicked, and
Yeah.
and why you felt the need to start, and what is your show called?
So I'm known on the internet as Today I Grew Up, one word, and it's actually a Heart Like War song. So going back full circle, it's about growing up from high school to college and just kind of finding your identity and who you are. And so Today I Grew Up to me was always that cool kind of moniker. And I kind of had it as a nickname early on social media as a handle for fun on Instagram. I was like, huh, that's a fun name, Today I Grew Up. And I didn't really think of it much. And I had started my YouTube channel back or before I even knew how to use YouTube. I think it was around maybe 2011, 2012. But it was just me doing like, hey, look, here's a new Mattel hoverboard. Here's a Jaws toy. Here's this little cool Nickelodeon throwback action figure. And so I would just start like that. And then I started making like $100 a month on Google. And I was like, oh, that's cool, man. Like I can make money doing this on the side. Cool. Like I didn't think much of it at all. I was a therapist, marriage family therapist. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in psychology. Uh, Worked in the field for 10 years basically. But
Oh,
during
then you
my
must have paid off your college loan by now,
right.
right?
And not yet, but I mean that's the goal. But no, it's just school was so expensive that it's literally I owed over 100 grand in student loans and etc. But I will report, as soon as I started taking YouTube as a business, I started thinking branding, logo, think big, think of it as a business, grow your audience. As soon as I started getting the machine of what that meant, I never took a business class in my life, just did a lot of researching on my own. And then I realized something clicked. I'm like, hey, if I make videos people want to see, I can get retention, viewership, audience, fans, and then this could help build my side career to be maybe a main career. So I got super excited, and so I was very unhealthy. I worked 9 to 5 in a stressful job, came home, worked till 2, 3 in the morning every day, grinding the YouTube game. And I was like, this is going to pay off. This is going to pay off. And I just kept working, working, working. My paychecks went from 100 a month to 300 a month, 500 a month, $1,000 a month, and it just kept going up and up. And I was like, okay, like this is happening, like I got to just keep grinding. I was exhausted, I had compassion fatigue, I had every kind of fatigue you can imagine. At this point I don't have any kids, it's just my wife and I, but she could definitely feel the pull and the stress, and she was just being very supportive in believing in what I was wanting to do. And so I told myself I want to reinvest in myself, I believe in myself. And so in 2020 came, the world just was getting destroyed. And so everybody was watching my videos. So I jumped from 10,000 to 50,000 followers to 75,000 followers. My YouTube paychecks were bigger than my therapy paychecks. So I realized, you know what? I need to let go of the therapy thing, take a break. I can always come back to it later. And I became a full-time YouTuber as of October of 2020. And now it's January of 2023. I've been self-employed ever since. I invested $10,000 into the business to get all my equipment and get toys and all these things, and I made $50,000 in profit those first 2 years, and then now it's just been more than that. So I'm very humbled and blessed that it's, and now I'm partnering with Disney and Pixar, and it's just crazy. Like, I never knew I was going to be a YouTuber or content creator full time, but here I am. So here we are now.
Well, I mean, I've been watching David, and in fact, you can thank him or maybe blame him for me doing this myself now, because I was out in his neighborhood, and David and his wife allowed me to stay over there when I was doing an outreach with the school system out there. Donated a bunch of instruments, and we started talking about this, and here I am. It just took me a while because it's big leap, but I'm already glad that I did it. All right, so David mentioned Disney. So the first thing I want to say is David came out to a residential in Torrance, and we had about 60 adolescents there, and one of them loves the movie Aladdin. Nice. And wanted to be Jasmine and I'd be Aladdin, and we were going to do a whole new world, but a Green Day version.
Yeah.
So David came out. I was on drums, I think, but I was dressed as Animal from the Muppets for the drumming, and I had the Jasmine outfit. Must have been beneath the animal, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah.
So anyway, we got this young person. I couldn't find a Jasmine outfit. I finally found one, and it turns out it was too small. So I felt bad because I'm not trying to injure anybody or hurt their emotions. So what I did is I switched it, and I was Princess Jasmine, and she was Aladdin. We just switched the roles in the song, and David played, and and then I realized I had to change from Animal into Jasmine. So some people say that I did a striptease Magic Mike kind of dance in front of all the kids, but I just had to. All the clothes stayed on, folks.
It was so fun. Everybody was laughing. I just remember the happiness and joy you brought to everybody in that room. Everyone was just having a great time. Like, they vibed with the music. The cosplay was funny. Like, it was just a really fun time, and I still have vivid memories of that. And it was a little stressful because I'm a very like, okay, here's the set list, here's the songs, practice them, show up and play them. But it was just like, no, forget that. You just need to play what I tell you. Key of B. Okay, we're gonna change this to a step down. Yeah. Let's change the key. Okay, go. And I'm like, oh crap. Like,
yeah.
It was fun. It was fun though. I had a great time.
I'm working on it. Yeah. But we did it, and it was great. So I was just thinking of how that really ties into sharing your passions and going for it and being goal oriented, which is why I'm doing this show, because today we're talking about Toy Story, the first Toy Story that came out in the 90s, and it was the first Pixar feature, which I know that, let's see, George Lucas had Pixar, and he was going through a gnarly divorce, so he had to unload some things, and I don't think Howard the Duck helped with his bank account, although I love that movie. And they sold it to Steve Jobs.
Yep.
And around that time, John Lasseter was actually fired from Pixar for trying to push some things and go. And Pixar became a little successful with their short films and all of that. And then all of a sudden, John's back at Disney. My point is, this show that we're doing here is about what life experiences, be it traumatic or joyful, went into the making of these movies or songs or what have you, and then why do we all love it? Why is David surrounded by Toy Story swag? Right. And they're making part 5.
Yes, that was just announced, by the way.
So it keeps going, but all of these things started as one human being individual with an idea,
Mhm.
and then it kind of spreads out. And Toy Story is a tricky one to start with because since it's Pixar and Disney, there's a lot of writers and people that worked on the screenplay, but I'm going to mostly focus on John
Yeah.
because he was also the director. And I know David has a kind of heartbreaking story about one of the writers that we'll get into. But
Yeah.
first, I made a little film that's going to go through the background of John and a little bit about his childhood that I guarantee you people don't know out there because I did some detective work. I wear a
Nice.
trench coat and I get a magnifying glass and I go
I could see
online
that.
and I find stuff. I go through obituaries in
Yeah.
small towns and stuff. So watch out. Um, so anyway, here's that video, and when we come back, we're gonna talk. There were many writers and screenwriters who helped John Lasseter bring Toy Story to the screen. Joss Whedon, Andrew Stanton, Joel Cohen, Alec Sokolow, Pete Docter, and John Ranft. However, today we will focus on John's background and experiences since he was the main catalyst and director. Born in 1957, John grew up in Whittier, California, a hometown he shares with Richard Nixon. Although he has a fraternal twin, Joanna, John also had another sister who died as an infant. This sad event was discovered in his father's obituary, and to my knowledge has never been discussed publicly by John. Speaking of his father, John has mentioned growing up, hearing stories, brutal stories, from World War II told by his father, Paul, who enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1941 and served as a gunner on the USS Saratoga. He was also a plank owner on the USS Hancock. John has said, "My father pulled into Pearl Harbor 4 days after the bombing, and he said everything was still burning. He said they never told the public how bad it was. It was really bad." Paul's entire term of duty was served in the South Pacific throughout the duration of World War II until his discharge in 1945. Woody was based on a pull-string Casper that John owned when he was a child. Buzz Lightyear was based on a G.I. Joe action figure that John also owned when he was a child. The rest of John's story towards Pixar and Toy Story has been told before, but it is interesting that the majority of John's films were made up of inanimate objects that are self-aware and yearn to be real. Was this due to a conscious or subconscious attraction to the Velveteen Rabbit, with which there are unmistakable similarities with Toy Story? The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams includes the following elements. It is about toys who can move and talk to each other. The rabbit wants to be real for the same reasons as Buzz Lightyear. He can't jump like real rabbits can. Toys fear being abandoned and want to have as much attention as possible. But the most convincing part is when the rabbit in the Velveteen Rabbit is talking with the horse, who has been played with a lot by the boy's father and then passed to the boy. This really reminds me of Toy Story 2 and 3, but that's for another day. In the many years that led up to Toy Story, John made short films such as Tin Toy and The Lady and the Lamp, both of which follow inanimate objects as if they're real. Why is that? Was John passionate about making these films as a way to hang on to his childhood, or more specifically, the memory of his sister who passed away? Could the unseen father in Toy Story symbolize John's father, who may have been emotionally distant after his World War II experiences? Toy Story is a tale of the search for validation, identity, and meaning. John Lasseter's mother was an art teacher who strongly supported John's interest in the arts. John's father went on to get a job in the automotive industry. Did John combine the artistic, emotional mind with the mechanical and practical? As material possessions, the lives of the toys are defined by their utility. Andy's emotion towards his toys are based on the notion of how useful they are to him. He loves the toys because of what they represent, like childhood, imagination, and fun, but is able to lay them aside when he no longer needs or wants to play with them. All right. Oh, you guys are still here. Fantastic. Hi, everybody. So John Lasseter, right? He's from Whittier, California, which I believe is where, is it Nixon grew up? I think Nixon.
I think you're right. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
that's a wild connection. Yeah.
And his father was a World War II veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He was sent to the South Pacific, and his mom was just a fantastic art teacher. So his father gets back from the South Pacific, and he works at Chevy, doing parts and stuff like that, selling parts. Something at Chevy with parts, guys. And they were also highly religious. They went to the Church of Christ, and John has talked about drawing cartoons during services and just being super focused on animation. And listening to the things that I've heard him say in my research for today's show, it reminds me of myself a little bit, because to get good at things and to really get intense about things, and for me it's music and movies and literature and just all of that, or anything that I like to know everything. I want the buffet of information, which was more fun before we had the internet to find that.
Yeah.
But anyway, John, his mom, since she was an art teacher, really supported him and would get him these things, to the point that when he was 5 years old, he won this contest, and because he drew the Headless Horseman. So you can see that Disney for John has been the thing his whole life, and he has said that Walt Disney was just his biggest inspiration, and he aspired to be like Walt. We won't really be going into some of the other things about John Lasseter that you're free to look up now, or please come back. But you might have seen on the news. We're gonna go ahead and focus on Toy Story, and now back to our regular scheduled program.
That was great.
Anyway, and then he saw Sword in the Stone in the 60s, and that got him. And he decided that he was going to do animation. But before all of that, when I look at Toy Story, it just seems to be, to me, about hanging on to things. You know, Woody's trying to hang on to Andy and to be sort of the leader of this group, and Buzz is trying to hang on to his identity, right?
Yep.
And
right.
and the validation there, and then realizing that you're just a toy, or for us you're just one of 8 billion people on the planet, or what have you.
You're just generic.
and for me, like, just starting the show, I had to come to terms with, like, I knew there were a lot of podcasts and YouTube shows, but I saw an actual number, and I had to take a walk. I had to take a, like, why am I going to do this? But I'm doing it because I need to do this, and I'm passionate about it. And
Right.
if nobody watches this, that'll be sad, but I'm enjoying it right now. And that's really what you have to do, and that's what John was doing. But with that loss and everything else, as you saw in that film, this has been really quiet. But John's parents had a daughter, and she died in infancy. And it seems like that maybe wasn't something that they spoke about. And you combine that with John's father's experience in World War II. John has said that his father would tell him at a younger age about his experiences when he was sent to Pearl Harbor right after the bombing, and that John was told it was much worse than you may have ever seen it. Now, I don't know at what age John was told these things, but he has a father that back then they didn't have PTSD. They would just call it shell shocked or whatever. You would
Yeah.
just drink too much and cheat on your wife and smoke some Lucky Strikes, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's accurate. Yeah.
and then the loss of his sister. For me, I see a lot of that in the movie. Um, so I'm just wondering, with that knowledge, David, and the stuff that we uncovered, what do you think about Toy Story, especially seeing as this was John's first big pitch? This was his first big uh, feature. You know, this is a big movie. I'm old enough to remember it, but this was sort of John's coming out party, and he chose this story that he came up with. What do you
Yeah.
think, Toy Story genius?
The one thing that you said that really stuck out to me right now was when you said, um, it's a lot worse than we thought it was, and that to me was all of Toy Story. Because there's these scenarios. Woody is a nervous wreck because he's constantly trying to take care of everybody and be the leader and do all these things. He's the favorite child, right? Because he's like, Andy, that and me, I'm his favorite toy, so he already has that kind of thing. But everything he knew came to an end when Buzz comes in the room, and it's like, wait, why is Andy like this guy more than me? And so everything Woody was trying to do just got destroyed, which his emotions ate him up alive. He became jealous, angry. He wasn't really himself. He was treating other toys, he was yelling at other toys. Basically, he was telling them to shut up. Remember that one scene when they're complimenting Buzz? He's like, just shut up, I'll prove them wrong. And he was almost like a villain, almost like a bad guy, to be
Oh, I
honest.
think he is. Like,
Yeah,
I
he's
watched
like a
it last
villain
night
in a way.
after the kid went to bed. Yeah, I watched Toy Story after my 2-year-old went to bed. But I forgot that he basically doesn't try to murder Buzz, but like
Yeah.
he pushes him off the table.
Yeah.
And then he's pretty nasty, and that
Yeah.
goes into the jealousy and
Yeah.
losing his spot and all of that. So I'm I'm I see that a lot
Yeah.
in my work. We see that in our families. I
It's
mean,
very interesting because when you were talking about all that, I was like, yeah, in Toy Story, when you go scene to scene, it's always like, oh, come on, guys, it's not going to be that bad. And then things are bad. It's like now Buzz is missing. Now they're like, oh, Sid, he tortures toys and blows them up. Oh, now we're in his bedroom and he's actually pulling the heads off of the toys. This is really bad. This is actually worse than we thought,
oh
So it's
no,
that constant thing.
when they come across Sid's toys and they're all,
Yeah.
it looks like there's a movie to check out called Freaks, which
Okay.
is Todd Browning. So he had Dracula, right? Which
Nice.
was a huge success. And they said, do whatever you want, Todd. And he said, oh, I will. So he found real disabled and just challenged folks, which back then you would call them freaks, and they were in the circus,
Yeah.
and made them the stars of the film.
Yeah.
And there were moments in this movie where I was like, oh, they have seen Freaks.
Yeah, everything's influenced by everything. Even though Toy Story was a very original story, it's also, like everything else, influenced by something else, and you see that, like you said, it could be childhood experiences or stories from your father and things that just get ingrained in our subconscious mind that come out in our conscious mind eventually when we're trying to create. We all take inspiration and pull inspiration from others. Like, I'm in a band called Heart Like War. I have a Today I Grew Up YouTube channel, but it's not all my own. I'm pulling inspiration from John, from Pixar, from Disney, from the pop punk heroes I heard growing up listening to them. Everything's always, art imitates real life, right? You hear that expression all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in Toy Story, this story, even though it's a bunch of toys, freaking out, it really, if you really think of the psychology behind the story, you start realizing, hey, maybe I'm like Woody sometimes, maybe I'm like Buzz sometimes, maybe I'm Sid, maybe I'm the villain of my own story sometimes, because maybe my life's not going so great, so I take out my frustrations on others or these toys and rip their heads off because it helps alleviate my pain. As far as we know in the story, it looks like Sid's dad was like an alcoholic drunk or just not a present father, because there's a scene where Buzz looks at the TV and he's like, oh, I'm a toy? I didn't know I was an actual toy. And you can see like a dad sitting on a chair, but he's like passed out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know what the story is there. We just know he's not present. And Sid's off with dangerous tools in his bedroom. Where's his parental supervision? So it could be a long shot, and maybe we're assuming, but my theory is I don't think Sid had present parents, and that's probably why he was not a good kid or
Hmm.
presented as a good kid. And I think that that is a very interesting angle. When you start uncovering, like, how come we don't see Andy's dad? Well, we found out later on his dad died of cancer, and Woody was his toy, and when he died, that was passed on to Andy to have to remember his dad, and that's why Woody was so special to him. And then we find out later it was a canceled TV series, and all that, with why Woody wasn't, he's basically a limited edition rare toy that Andy's dad had. So
Now
that
you're
wasn't
going into
shown
the
in the movie, but
sequels. Look
yeah, I
out.
know. But
Look out.
what I'm trying to say, it's like there's a lot to unpack in the story that people might not realize or see because they're not looking for that.
Well, have you read The Velveteen Rabbit?
I haven't, but I know about
Okay.
it.
I remember
I
it
know about it.
from, it's a good memory from my elementary school. I grew up in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
and I remember the librarians would come and read books. And I remember that one because it really spoke to
Okay.
me. And speaking of, Woody was his father's toy.
Yeah.
That's what happens in The Velveteen Rabbit,
Wow. Interesting.
because the Velveteen Rabbit comes across this old toy horse that's just on its last legs, and it turns out that was his father's toy that
Oh,
was forgotten
right.
and became all raggedy. And like, the Velveteen Rabbit is about the toys who can move and talk to each other and are
Interesting.
self-aware, and the rabbit wants to be a real rabbit,
Mm.
and uh, for the same reasons as Buzz Lightyear might want to be, like, I want to fly, I want to jump like a real rabbit. So I was a little surprised that, there haven't been more complaints about the comparisons between Toy
Yeah.
Story and
Interesting.
Velveteen Rabbit,
I never
but
really heard that one.
that's art, man. I
Yeah.
mean, uh Led Zeppelin's first three albums are all stolen from Old Blue Skies. And I love Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin. Everything's from
Yeah.
somewhere. So this, when we talk about Andy's dad, I wonder if there's a connection there to John's father. I wonder how connected and how present John's father could have been after all those experiences. And then, this kid just wants to be an artist, and my wife, I fought a war, and I work in Chevy auto parts,
Yeah. Good
Um,
point. Good
and,
points.
and this is a good time for me to bring up that David here is a licensed, credentialed, super duper therapist.
Yeah.
Okay. I am not, I will not be, for reasons that make a lot of sense to me, such as they don't teach a class for what I do anyway.
That's true.
Um, so when we talk about these things, it's just our opinions and what we think may have happened. We're not saying this is why John went on to
Yeah.
make this story. And a lot of therapy and psychiatry, guys, is maybe this medication will work, maybe this treatment, maybe this therapy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that maybe John's father's experiences went into the story here, and also John's path of truly wanting to be an artist. He made a decision, and he was in the first class to go to Cal Arts. He was
Yeah.
taught by Ollie and Frank, who are these legendary um, Disney animators. He
Yeah.
was there with Tim Burton and Henry Selick. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Definitely.
um, that's all that. So that's what I think went into this movie. Do you have anything else of what you think may have influenced John?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said spot on to his story, and I think that he was definitely a deep thinker because every time I see his interviews or all the things that I saw him behind the scenes, he's always trying to find the other lens, the other angle. He's always trying to look outside the box, just like we are as creatives, but like in a different way where it was almost like sometimes when he spoke, I was like, he's talking like a therapist would because he's trying to unpack the emotions. He's trying to unpack the actions and the words and why these personalities are what they are, past and present. You know, when he was describing how they came up with the characters of like Mr. Potato Head, for example, he was like, if my parts were falling off all the time, I'd be a really frustrated person too. You know, and that
And
was
that's why
great.
you
You
get
know?
Don Rickles for that part.
Exactly, and that was perfect. But it was just cool to hear John always describe his creative process
Mhm.
with the character development, because that spoke to me as a therapist. Like, that's what I do when I have clients in therapy. I really analyze them and think, why are they who they are now? You know, what influenced them in the past? What's influencing them presently? You know, what in their psychology is driving them towards this point that they feel they need to be at or not be at, or whatever in between. You know, life is gray, it's not black and white. And I always remind people that. But it's just that to me was the coolest part about this art, and why I actually was attracted to Toy Story. It's not just the movie, it's everything creating the movie, the character development, the personality development. The storytelling is everything, because without storytelling you have no movie or sometimes no music. So storytelling, I think it always goes back to that root of telling a good story, explaining the characters and the psychology of the characters. That's what I take away from it, and I really loved and appreciated that in John. And it makes sense with given his background. He was around a lot of geniuses too,
Mhm.
so that helped shape him into the genius he became, I feel like.
And I just want to mention, because I want to give credit to all the creators. Yes, John directed this and he co-wrote it and he worked on the screenplay, but he had a team including Pete Docter,
Yes.
John Ranft,
Hmm.
Joss Whedon. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we won't be going into recent news developments, but Google is at your disposal. Joel Cohen, who's not one of the Cohen brothers.
Yeah.
He's just a writer that worked on a lot of Disney stuff, and I think the Cheaper by the Dozen remakes with Steve Martin and Alec Sokolow.
Sakura.
And
Yeah.
I know that David wanted to share something about, is it Joe?
Joe. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Joe was part of the Mosaic Foundation, which was an organization that helped kind of bridge the gap between, you know, cultural elements and also help those who are less fortunate or in need in lower income communities. So he actually was sponsoring a couple guys in that foundation to just be part of those spiritual retreats that they would have. You know, it was cool because it was like spiritual, psychological, and it was just a well-rounded organization that just really helped people from these low-income areas kind of become successful. He was really working towards that. He really believed in that, and even though he was, you know, a really high up guy at Pixar, like he was the guy. He was very humble, and when you talk to him, he would brag about the charity work he was doing or the things he was doing, like sponsoring others or being part of the Mosaic Foundation. That was his passion. And so, unfortunately, you know, he did pass away in the early 2000s. He was on his way to a Mosaic Foundation event, and he actually had two of the guys who was sponsoring in the car with him. He wasn't driving, he was a passenger. But unfortunately, that car, they're on the Highway 1, they're going up Northern California, and some car came and like they tripped up this path, and the car just went over the edge. And only one person survived from the wreck. It wasn't Joe. Unfortunately, two people passed away, including Joe, and then the other guy survived. But he was just saying, like, it was just crazy to read that because it was just very depressing. And Pixar, it was obviously big, devastating news. He was the voice of Wheezy, the voice of actually several Toy Story characters in the background. But that was just one of the more notable ones. He was the voice of Wheezy, and he also was the co-writer and creator of Toy Story as well. So it was a big blow for John and Pixar and everybody. And it's just really heartbreaking. But you know, a lot of people did say, well, he passed away doing what he's really passionate about. But it just makes us sad that, you know, that was where the story ended for him, because who knows what he could have accomplished if he stuck around. I'm sure even crazier, bigger things. But yeah, so that was a big, devastating loss. But digging into a story, it was just like, it was cool to read how human the humanity behind these people, because a lot of times you hear these names like John Lasseter. Oh yeah, he's just a rich billionaire in a mansion somewhere. Not really. Like, these are people who have hardships just like everybody else. So, like, yeah, they might be successful or have successful titles, but it doesn't strip away their humanity at all. It doesn't mean they don't have good hearts,
No.
or that they struggle too, like anybody else. Like you said, we all do things that we all screw up. We're human. So that was just something I wanted to share. It was a tragic story, but it was also kind of inspiring to hear that he's in his last days. He basically spent his life trying to help others, and that's what I try to do in my life. And it was really cool to, hear that he was so passionate about a charitable foundation like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, these things that become bed sheets and toothbrushes and
Right.
Pampers
Fancy lights and
were
signs.
yeah, were originally somebody's idea. Everything was just somebody's idea. And if it's put into like the Disney machine, then it's just poof, it's
Exactly.
out there. Speaking of which, I'm sure David's happy about this. I am not necessarily, but I think yesterday they announced Toy Story
Yes.
5.
Yes.
So it continues and it keeps going. And I know that they've had cartoons on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
My son
Shorts.
likes to watch the Forky.
Yeah. Forky asked a
shorts.
question. Yeah, those are fun.
So it continues, but this series won't really be focusing on sequels and remakes and all that. I want to focus on the human beings that made this, and then how this, once it goes out there, which I see as their therapy, goes out there, and art is therapy, and then we consume it, and if we like it, maybe we want to get a Woody t-shirt, or go on a ride at Disneyland. It becomes part of us, and in many ways part of our ways to deal with life, a good way to blow off steam, maybe just have that a cherished memory, and including it in parts of your life. So now we're going to
Absolutely.
part 2,
Yeah.
which is, why do you think Toy Story has become this massive thing and kicked off Pixar, which of course has been very successful and is just part of our everyday life? Why do you think Toy Story broke through and continues to be popular?
I really believe that it's one of the greatest films, in my personal opinion, of all time, for kids circuit animation, but now it's transcended to the adult market, because as I've been doing this whole Toy Story thing as an adult, I've 100 times have heard, why are you doing this? How are you into this? But I realized as I was doing this that there's so many people like me out there, and it was so crazy to. One of my best friends is from the Netherlands, and he's in his 30s. He has a kid now, and it's just like, these are normal people like me that are adults, but they love Toy Story. And every time I talk to somebody, an adult especially, I get more excited with the adults because I'm an adult, so I relate to them on the Toy Story passion. It always comes down to the same thing. It always comes back down to the psychological. One of my friends, Cam the Man 95 on YouTube, he's really a huge fan too. He told me, he's like, when I watch Toy Story, any Toy Story film, I relate it to my life in some form. There's some takeaway from that movie that I apply to my life. And when I look at the movies now as an adult and I rewatch them, he's totally right. Like we were talking about earlier, the humanity behind Woody's personality, Buzz's personality, Sid's personality, whatever it is, that whatever character, there's something to take away from that on a psychological standpoint. And if you look at it through an adult lens, there's a lot of value in it. It's not just, oh, here's a kids movie. It's more than that for us, well, for those who choose to see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Toy Story 2, picking up that next story, it was like Woody found out who he was. He had a battle and struggle, like, what's my purpose? Do I go back to Andy? Is he going to forget about me when he gets old and just discard me like trash? Or should I go with these guys I just met because they're my family, supposedly, because they're created in the same factory as me. We're from the same TV show. We're going to go to a museum to be appreciated for children's for years to come. And so that was cool because it kind of showed that in life we all come through crossroads and split decisions, and that's why Toy Story is successful. I think the storytelling is so captivating. It's so riveting. You can't help but fall in love with any of the characters, because if you don't like Woody, well, there's like 50 other characters you can fall in love with in that movie. So it's pretty cool. And I think that's why Toy Story has stood the test of time for success and continues to make more money for them every film, including Toy Story 4 made $1 billion for them worldwide when it was all said and done. So of course a 5 has to come. I mean, if they want to make money, it makes sense too, but there's more story to tell. This is the thing. Outside the money, I didn't like the ending of Toy Story 4. I feel like them separating wasn't the best ending. That's why I liked the idea of 5. Maybe they can wrap it up a little sweeter, because 4 was a very bitter ending for me. Although some people loved it, there's depth there for why. But yeah, I know it's a lot to unpack, but Indiana Jones 5 is coming out. So, I mean,
I was about to use the Indiana Jones
analogy,
which is
I was done.
Toy Story is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
Toy Story 2 is a Temple of Doom.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool. Okay. Toy Story 3 is The Last Crusade, man.
Yep.
That is an emotional gut punch of a movie with real human and real mature ideas in it, you know. Toy Story 4, dude, that is the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That is Shia swimming with the monkeys. I did not like it. But that's because I felt Toy Story 3 just nailed it, and it was
a great film.
That's everything. So film. Toy Story 5, look, my son's gonna be 3 in April. I'm gonna see it.
Yeah,
you know, it's fine, but I'm not excited about it, and that's because it is just to make money. I feel like they have told the story. But I wanted to say, I have for years, I ran a music school, like a pirate ship thing for all these misfit toys. These were the kids that you would see in Toy Story that were beaten up by Sid and the baby on the spider, you know, but they were creative. I just had these amazing creative kids. In fact, I just found out yesterday that one of these kids, her name is Tiana O'Hara, and she was just at the studio all the time. She helped me paint, started writing songs. She's playing Coachella a second time.
That's amazing.
And she joined this huge band that I saw in Rolling Stone called Boy Genius.
Nice.
I'm in my 40s, so if I know about a new band, it's obviously pretty popular.
Yeah.
But these kids were there, and then they grew up.
Yep.
And I had a harder time connecting to the next generation of kids coming up. And I would use the analogy all the time to people, oh, I'm just Woody in Toy Story. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And now watching this movie again last night, I thought about that. And it hit me, because we're all Woody at some point, and we're all Buzz at some point. And that's, for me, why movies like this really made an impact, like a deep impact. 1996, Elijah Wood.
People just relate to it, like you're saying. Like, people just relate to the content. Like we identify so much with these characters. I call myself Woody all the time, because I'm the one who's always, I feel like, running, telling someone to do something, or I'm telling myself to do something, or I'm always a nervous wreck about something. I feel like I'm Woody a lot, you know, so like just naturally my baseline. And so I always try to calm myself down to not be Woody all the time, and just try to chill. And I think Buzz has that kind of maturity where he's a little bit more like, okay, let's think a little bit deeper about this. Let's think before we act. Buzz was always kind of a little slower to react. And I feel like that helps balance them out. You know, it's like, and that's how I look at it in my life. It's like, I always try to look for that balance where I'm not too one way. I'm just trying to be balanced as much as possible.
And hey, for you guys out there in the audience, tell me what you really love about Toy Story, and what you've included Toy Story in your life. Like, do you have to wear a Woody shirt when you go barbecuing or something? I don't know.
Or
Did
like
you
me,
get into...
I have Believe in Yourself right now.
Well, there you go.
Alien.
I don't have any Toy Story. I think Miles does, but it's not going to fit me.
We'll get you a shirt. I'll get you one. I'll get you a shirt.
But it's just, I find it interesting that the first computer animated feature cartoon right?
Yeah, basically.
Is about something so organic and so human. When you don't really see many hand drawn films since then,
True.
which I miss personally. Um, but I just find it to be interesting and ironic. But and I would like to see more movies like this from that particular studio.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so that's Toy Story. Please send me your stuff, folks, your ideas or some pictures of maybe you and your family doing Toy Story things, or if you're a Toy Story cosplayer, um, what have you. And I know Tim Allen just confirmed that he's in for Toy Story 5.
Super excited about that.
So getting paid a lot.
For
All right.
sure.
So even though I just did an intro last week with Monique. Thanks again to Monique for being with me for the launch. David and I have received a couple questions looking for some answers. So I got 2 of them. Are you
Cool.
ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. You can put your therapist hat on.
Sounds good.
Okay. How important are the arts for mental health? From Cami.
I love that question because it's pivotal. I think that there's a lot of research. So besides our experiences and what we've experienced, there's a lot of research that shows that art is the expression of art is the most one of the most therapeutic things a client can embark in, not only for the clinician but for the client, for them to express themselves in a way where they can just be free without any rules, without any limits. If you really think about it, a lot of the clients that I've seen, or people in general, they are raised in the society where we have to tell them what to wear, what to say, what to do, where to go, what to eat. We're constantly bombarded, not even through our, say you don't even have parents, you'll get that on the news, you'll get that through commercials, you get that through propaganda, newspapers, people on the street, right? So given that those limits and constraints that people have psychologically, art is kind of like that loophole where it's like I can finally be free, I can be myself, and in this situation, to express myself in art, I can be free without free stress or worry that somebody's going to judge me, that someone's going to tell me what to do, because that's what art is. It's an expression of here's a blank canvas, now you do what you wish with it. Whether you put one little dot of paint on it, or you do a beautiful landscape, or you rip the canvas in half, you've just created some form of art. Doesn't matter what you do with it, it's art. And that's why I appreciate things like abstract art, or so there's so many layers to that. But we as human beings are so complicated and so complex that we need outlets, and art and connection with mental health, to me, is the most freeing experience that a human could experience, because it's a place, a safe place, free of judgment, where somebody can go in and just be who they really are deep down, without judgment, without anything. And a good therapist will guide that, especially, and say, be free. You can do what you wish, as long as it doesn't involve hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, because there is that boundary there. You are free to do what you wish. And that to me is everything. And art to me is everything. And that's why I'm an artist in the way I create videos or I make music. For me, that's the way I was able to cope with my mental health as well as a therapist. We have therapists too. So yeah, to me, the connection of art and mental health is huge, because it helps release and relieve any kind of mental health issue you may have. In that moment, you're free to just be, and be present, and be heard. And that's something people struggle with. They just want to be heard. And art is a way to be heard.
So it's a good way to, say, here we are now.
It always comes back to that too, right? Or today I grew up. Today I learned something new today.
Here
right?
we are. Guys, most human beings don't really express themselves in an honest way. We're always acting. And sometimes we lie to ourselves.
True.
Right?
Yep.
So for me, for example, if you're learning how to play a certain chord on guitar or write a song, it's really impossible to think about anything else while you're so focused on something. And to me, that's meditation.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I'm not, as I said last episode, I'm not hippy dippy. I'm not a new age guru. I'm very meat and potatoes, blue collar guy from New England. Um, but I figured out a way to kind of be present with myself, and that's creating music and art, and and with Toy Story, I would spend a lot of time with kids at the studio or in hospitals that had stage 4 cancer, leukemias, horrible burns and things like
Yeah.
that. And I like being there and being present. And I would ask them, "What's your favorite movie or your song?" And if they couldn't talk, a lot of them couldn't, I would look at what they're wearing or maybe what kind of Band-Aid they had on,
Yeah.
or talk to the family. And there was one little girl that loved Toy Story.
Mm.
So this was the first time I did this because I couldn't have instruments where I was. So I just used my phone and I had her record some sound effects to this scene in Toy Story 2, I think, where it's the opening scene on the train
Nice.
and blue one-eyed Bart. Does that
Oh,
make
yeah,
sense?
that's Toy Story
Okay.
3. Yeah, that's
Toy Story 3.
intro. Yeah.
And then eventually they felt good enough to do the dialogue.
Nice.
So their voices were coming out of these things that they feel very comfortable with.
That's awesome.
And which is Woody and the other characters, and that made them feel better about themselves in the moment. So what I'm going to do at the end of this is I'll play that, and the
that's awesome.
voices and the music
That's awesome.
that you're going to hear are those two children, and this is more than a decade ago.
That's so cool.
I won't tell you what happened with them or anything because I think that's the family's business.
Right.
But that to me is what art can do.
Yeah.
And that's taking someone else's thing. The next step is to then do your own. John Lasseter loved The Sword and the Stone, and then he went off and made his own stuff, and that's why we're talking about it. And that's why it's important, because art is immortal. It's an
Right.
immortal vampire, and for me it doesn't go away even if the creator maybe had some transgressions, which is none of my business. I still like the art. Okay.
Yeah.
Beethoven wasn't a nice person. Boy, I love his music.
Right.
Okay, there's
exactly.
one last question.
No, yeah, it's great.
From Louise,
Mhm.
here in Los Angeles. As parents, how do we recognize our child's need to be creative? What will we see? We are nuts about academics, but can you explain more about the importance of a creative activity for a child and how to support this part of their development? What does that look like? How important is it for them to value being creative later in their lives? How do you build this into them as a live tool?
I love that question, and I'm very experienced in that area. So, first, people who don't know, the first 4 years of my psychological training, I worked with children, primarily just ages 3 to 17. And so, what I did is I did a lot of parent training. I used to go to people's homes, and I would help these parents parent basically. And a lot of times parents would be like, "Here's my kid, fix them, they're broken." And it's just like, no, if anything, your parenting is broken. And it's not the kid that's the problem here. I see the parenting as the issue. And so they didn't like to hear that, but through psychoeducation and training, they were able to turn things around. And the kid just the when you what this is what I like to always tell parents, and this is going to be good advice for any parent watching this, is you need to think of your kids not as a tool or utility or somebody that you can just, your responsibility to like develop their personality or develop who they're going to be as a human. That's not your job. You have to look at it like you're a shepherd steering a flock. It's like you're a little bit more, you're on the sidelines, you're guiding your child, you're not building your child. So your child is not a robot. It's not something you can program. It's not something you can just say, I want my kid to do this, this, and this, and have this academic achievement, have this award, finish this goal. That's not our job as parents. As much as crazy as that sounds, it's not our job. Our job is to steer our child to the places they're supposed to go. And how do we know that? Well, kids are born with over 400 different personality traits that are passed on from our genealogy. And what do you do with that? That's why kids are smart. They just have so much in their brains that are developing. Is it our job to say you can do this part of your personality, but you can't express that part of your personality? That's not our job. Our job is to be like, wow, this is what we have. How do we guide the ship now to make it appropriate? So we're going to be guiding our children to greener pastures. We're not going to be telling them what they can and can't do. And so to answer your question about the artistic expression, we have to be super observational in what our children are doing. If you sit down with them and they color and they just want to color all the time, maybe that's a good indicator that they want to color more often. And then they can express that and they could show us that. So what do we do if we're good parents who want to foster that artistic expression? You have to schedule that in. If you're a parent who wants to schedule your child's time, put that in the schedule. There's an art time. There's an art block or a free time block in their schedule where they could just draw. They could just color. They could just maybe play a video game, right? Or maybe if they're, it doesn't matter what age they are, there's something they can do to express their art. What if they have interest in music? My kid right now loves music. She started drumming on boxes as she was watching some music videos. And so what I did is I got her a drum, and now she drums on that drum. And now I make sure every day I try to get her on that drum only if she wants to. I don't force it. I don't, there's going to be days where your kid might not want to do that, but it doesn't mean they've given up on it either. So you always have to kind of offer and try. And that's how you can foster and facilitate your child's growth productively and successfully. Don't think of your kids as something they have to be. Look at your kids as something you have to steer them to be, because they already who they are. We are who we are. You can't change that. You can't change what people say. You can't change what people do, but we can definitely help influence behaviors, but just make sure that you're fostering your kid and you're not trying to push your kid into a box that they're not meant to be in. That's the best advice and answer I have.
And if I may recommend this to every parent and really every human being in the world or in your job, be passionate. Let people see that you're passionate about something and that you have an interest in something. And it's not just, watching shows about serial killers on Netflix while drinking red wine, or being on your phone or social media. If you're into, Van Gogh, have it around the house, man.
Exactly.
Just the exposure of it,
Yeah.
My son makes his own decisions, and he's only 2. Nice. But that kid has decided that he loves Johnny Cash.
Yep.
And he loves trains, and that boy loves Ringo Starr.
It's awesome.
From the Beatles. Ringo.
Okay. He's an amazing drummer, by the way. I don't know if you told people that.
Ringo?
He's amazing. No, but your kid, your son,
I don't want to make this. My
your son plays drums. That's amazing.
But he chose to. Obviously, I have my drums are downstairs, but it's just around.
Yeah.
So he went for it, and he can play.
It's amazing.
An actual beat, but I didn't want to force him to do it. So it's that.
Yeah, it's a balance
of you want to force your child to do something, because I gravitated towards music and art not because anybody was putting it in front of me, because they weren't. It was because I needed to do it, And if you're lucky enough to have the means to have some things around to expose your kid to, amazing, because the sculpture is inside the plaster anyway.
Yeah,
you can just chip away at it. But the sculpture is gonna come out.
Yeah, and
here's a quick, to invent this metaphor.
Here's a quick story, and here's a quick story. In fact, I want to share that relates with this. Is when I was a kid, I was in first grade. My parents wanted me to be a pianist. They're like, "You're gonna play piano." I'm like, "Okay, is that a question?" Or so they put me in piano lessons. I showed up, and after about 3 lessons, I told my parents, "I hate this. I don't want to keep doing it." They're like, "Keep trying. You got to do it." So I was forced to be a pianist, and I hated it. So I quit. Never played piano again. And then also in junior high, you have to play an instrument. I'm like, I don't think I want to play an instrument. You have to pick one. I go to band. My teacher's like, you're going to play the baritone. I'm like, I want to play trumpet. You're going to play the baritone. I played the baritone, hated it. And then I was like, I'm playing trumpet or I quit. And he's like, okay, fine, play the trumpet. So my whole life I always felt like I was trying to be put in places I didn't want to be. And so that's why I started listening to punk music, because it was so freeing. You know, punk rock was so against the grain. It was against what my parents listened to, what people at school listened to. So I got into punk rock. I played guitar. I tried to mimic those sounds, and that developed who I became. I became who I wanted to become. And I expressed my art through my own way, but it took time, and I had to break out of those molds that people tried to force me into. So yeah, that was, that's an example of how my situation wasn't so nice to develop my artistic expression. Mine was very much suppressed, and it's probably why I'm still a punk rocker today in my 30s, traveling in Japan playing pop punk. So probably part of the story.
I've never had a music lesson in my life. David
Yeah.
knows that. I don't want to make this a thing about. David knows I can play a couple instruments,
No,
and
you're incredible at what you do.
but even though I've never had a lesson, I've taught. I don't know. It's more than, I don't know the number. Definitely more than 1,000, especially because of the assemblies and stuff I used to do. I can teach anybody how to play an instrument
Yeah.
in 1 minute, and I like it when people test me on that because I kind of have it down. Then we immediately go into making original material because it's harder to make a mistake when you're creating other than learning, a Nirvana song or whatever.
Right.
Um, like you two when they started couldn't do covers because they sucked, so they just wrote their own music,
That's
and
awesome.
that was great. I mean, now they suck again, but they had some great years. But anyway, thank you, Louise, for that question. And
Great
David, like,
questions.
it's amazing because like you're just, your stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it's a real loss that you're not currently doing therapy, and I hope that you come around again with all of this that you've gained,
Yeah.
because man, you're amazing, and
Thank
I've
you. I
seen
appreciate that.
David in some challenging, difficult
Oh yeah.
environments really pull it off. So
Thank you. I
he
appreciate that.
really has my respect. All right, tell everybody about where they can find your music and Today I Grew Up and all that.
So I've streamlined everything to be super simple because I like, people to find my stuff. So I say, if you want to find my music, all you have to do is go to Google, type in "Heart Like War," 3 words separated, "Heart
It's gonna
Like
be
War."
right up there. I'm gonna
Yeah,
put it right
and
up there.
you right away you'll find everything. So all my links. Say you're on Instagram, Heart Like War is the handle. Say you're on YouTube, Heart Like War, Twitter. We have a TikTok now, so it doesn't matter where you are. Heart Like War, you'll find it. Also, same thing with Today I Grew Up, but that's one word. It's not separate words. It's Today I Grew Up. Brand is just one word, and that is same thing with my handles for Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, etc. And I have websites for both of these. So heartlikewar.com, todayigrew.com. That's where you can find everything about me.
Boop, boop, boop,
Todayigrew.com
right here.
and heartlikewar.com. Those are basically my landing pages for everything. So I'm out there. You'll find me.
So I finished the website, at least it's out there, and that's hwanow.com, right? And we're on Facebook and Instagram. Man, I'm not doing TikTok yet.
I'm gonna convince you eventually
Do
why
I
that's a
have
good
to do a
marketing idea.
dance? I don't want to do a
No, you don't. You don't have
dance.
to do a dance, but it's a great place to advertise yourself to get people back to YouTube. It worked for me.
Okay. Maybe I'll start doing makeup tutorials.
They're basically commercials. If you just think of it as like it's a place to make a commercial ad to come back to my website or come back to my YouTube channel, etc. So
And I have a professional email now. It's matt@hwanow.com. That's working. So send your questions or your comments or anything, or if you're looking for advice, to that. And our phone number is 424-488-6087. And if you call, we'll put your call on the air. We tape this, so I can edit in the movies and stuff. Sorry to burst the bubble, everybody. I'll do some Instagram lives and stuff down the road. And I think, and I am now available for speaking and consulting work, which I've done a lot of. I'm willing to do some traveling again now that Miles, like, he's in preschool right now.
oh, nice.
But I just want to thank everybody for hanging on, and I really want to thank David
Thank
because
you.
first of all, he was a lot of support, and talk about a good role model for getting these things together. So I really want to thank David for coming with us today. I want to thank the creators of Toy Story for creating a really rad part of our artistic community, which is going to keep going, I guess.
Yep. It gives me job
And
security, I tell everybody. So that's a good thing for me.
I haven't decided next week's show, but I'll get it out there in a couple days. So I just want this is my first time doing this. And look, guys, I hate it when I'm gonna do it. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Here we are now, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and not TikTok, but all that stuff. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
So this has been the first real episode, Toy Story. Everybody thank David.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you, Matt. Also, you've been a huge positive influence in my life. And when I always butter you up or compliment you, you always tell me, don't get Mother Teresa on me. But I have to do it sometimes. I just think you're an amazing, incredible individual. I love what you're doing with this channel. There's a lot of value here for people that they can learn something or at least appreciate, the art, the connection with mental health, movies, music. It's for me, it's a dream podcast for me. And I'm glad you're doing this because it's something that people are really going to take something. There's something for everyone. And I'm loving it. So thank you. Thank you for being you. You're an amazing person and keep up the great work.
It was hard to describe what this was going to be.
Right.
For me. But now that we've officially done one, I think it's pretty obvious, right? Everybody, we take obvious, something, in this case, it's Toy Story.
Yeah.
What went into the creation of this from this person's life.
And I like the real life connections. Yeah. The real life connections to that. Yeah.
Subconscious. And then boom, because it's art, it connects to us. Why? And what are some of the stories, the way it's connected? And then that's it.
This is the art and mental health connection. Like that question that we got asked, your podcast is that, it's art connection with mental health and real life people, fictional characters, but also how that translates to our lives, which is probably why we're such mega fans of these films, because we relate to them. And it's great. And the same thing with music,
And what song from from Heart Like War should I play us out with?
I would say our biggest hit is "Screaming." That's like the one everybody loves.
Screaming?
So our single "Screaming." Yeah.
Okay. All right. You're listening to WAAF, Worcester, Boston, Hard Rock, 107.3. Here's "Screaming" from Heart Like War.
Scream your head up for the underdog. You make me nervous that I'm still in